Glen Williams is no ordinary retired police officer and detective. He's a man who's lived through the devastation of trauma and PTSD and has come out stronger on the other side. Having walked the front lines in some of the most intense and heartbreaking moments, Glenn didn't just survive his own battle with trauma, he's transformed it. Now he's dedicated his life to helping others to do the same. With thrilling stories from his time as a detective to his mission of teaching trauma recovery, this conversation is as riveting as it is inspiring. Glenn, such a good day to talk with you. What initially drew you into law enforcement? And did you always wanted to become a police officer?
I did not. I never really thought about it until I was working for the federal government, and an application came out for federal law enforcement. And I knew what I was doing. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And so I took a look at that. It suddenly clicked. That's what I wanted to do. I was probably 32 at the time. And so I started applying and took all the things, and the application process for federal law enforcement is like 6 inches thick. It's huge. And I passed everything, got through all the tests, and then the last thing was the medical, and they disqualified me because I have sugar diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And they could do that then. They can't now. But I was lost. I didn't know what to do because I finally figured out what I wanted to do with my life, and it was gone. But I had a buddy that talked to me and said, hey, there's a local police department that's hiring. Why don't you go apply there? And I went, okay, I'll do that. And after I got in, I was hooked. And that's where I wanted to be.
Oh, wow. So what's the difference between working for the federal government and working for a local as a police officer?
Better pay and hours, probably. And
Better pay.
the federal government looks at the big problems. They don't look at the small things on the street that we deal with every day. Felony theft is no big deal to them, but if they get a group doing felony thefts, like the mafia, they go after them, and they go after the drug lords, and they go after the bigwigs while we handle the drug stuff on the street one by at a time.
Oh, those are the guys that kick down the door and smoke everybody out, hey?
Well, they like to portray that. We do that more than they do, actually. But when they do it, it's the kingpins. They don't go after the lower level stuff, but we always start the investigation at the lower level and work it up. And
But there's
eventually,
still exciting stuff as a local police officer, eh?
oh yeah, plenty, believe me. And
Plenty.
there's a lot of heartbreaking things, and I think that's where a lot of things start with local officers. In fact, everything starts with local officers, and then works their way up.
Holy cow. So can you share to us a memory from your early days on the job that shaped your perspective on policing?
Yeah, I wanted to go out and help people. That was my primary goal when I started. And then I discovered politics in work. And every officer that I know that's quit, none of them quit because of the job. The job is wonderful to help people, but it's the politics that we get tired of and we leave eventually. So what I learned was really stay out of politics as best I can. What I also learned was that people want us there to help them. And when we can, it's not an ego boost. It's let's do good for somebody else. And if we do that as life, anybody in life, we're working to do good for others, our lives become better.
While on the job, did you have any exciting stories?
Oh, yeah. One day, we had a young lady that was, her husband was a gangbanger. And he took a shot at her. He got mad at her in another city, and then her parents lived in the city I was working in, and he came over there and called us. So I got assigned to sit out front of that house to protect her from the ex-husband or husband. And her parents and her brothers were gangbangers also. So we were standing there on the porch, talking to them, finding out what's going on, and her husband drove by. So I jumped in my car, flipped around, and got turned around and chased him. And when I got to a stop sign about 2 blocks away, there were 2 cars there, identical make, model, and color. Each had one male driver, and I did not have a a license plate or anything. So one car went deeper into the subdivision, the other turned to go out of the city, so I chased that car, and unfortunately that was the wrong car. It was a kid from California that had borrowed his friend's car, and we pulled him out at gunpoint because the guy had a gun and was taking a shot at his wife, and it turned out not to be him, so I got assigned to go sit back on that house. Well, I sat there from 10 at night until really early the next morning, and I could not see anything, and they would not let me in the house. I wanted to sit at the steps up where her bedroom went upstairs and sit down at the bottom of the stairs to prevent anybody, but they didn't like police officers very much. And so I had to sit out in my car all night. Finally, about 2 in the morning, this little 10-year-old kid, the little brother, comes running out and says, he's shooting everybody, he's shooting everybody. And what had happened was this guy parked 3-4 blocks away, climbed through backyards to get to their house, snuck in a back window that he had used when they were dating, and he came by her bedroom where she was laying in bed with her 2-year-old son in her arms, and he shot her in right between the eyes. He used a .22 caliber pistol, so I couldn't hear it outside the house. And then he was down in the living room, and when I went through the door, after the kid told me, I busted through the door. I expected to get shot. But we went through. The brothers were fighting with him. I took care of it, got him down, handcuffed him, and got him taken care of. And then I went up to check on the sister, and unfortunately, she did not make it. And I just can't imagine the depravity of somebody to shoot their wife while she's holding their 2-year-old son in her arms. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever, but that's what happened. While I was fighting him up in the living room, I couldn't find the gun, so I had no idea who had the gun, where it was at. It was there somewhere, I knew that, and here were a bunch of gang members that did not like cops, and I got lucky because they liked him less than they liked me. So, yeah, sometimes it just pays to be lucky. But they later found the gun. It had been kicked in the fight over against the wall under some curtains, so we couldn't see it. But, so that was one experience.
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for your service. I mean, you're truly the angel that protects the society. And what a story. I mean, and so what are some other things that you see that's quite common in the police force as well? So is it just domestic violence, or are there other things?
There's other things. I've had cases where I started with a basic theft and it turned into a nationwide crime spree. And I got to refer that one to detectives. I was in patrol at that time, and refer that to detectives, and ended up referring it to Army criminal investigations because there was a military member involved. And that one was a fun one because it started off as no big deal, a credit card fraud at a Kmart. But then as I got tracking back, I tracked it back all the way across the country to New Jersey. And then there was felony after felony after felony, and I was able to finally figure out who it was. And then when I found out it was military, I went, okay, those guys can handle a lot of that, and they did. So that was a good case. And then I've had other cases where it starts off with a burglary, but then I end up tying him to drugs and guns and stolen cars, and those were always kind of fun. Those were a lot of fun when you get into some big stuff. And then but then we have the ones that are unfortunately a little more common, and that's the heartbreaking ones where kids are injured. One of the ones, and this is the one that made a big difference in my life and career. I was an 18-year officer, and I walked into work 6 in the morning and got a call. I didn't even get to sit down, and I got a call to go find a missing child, 3-year-old boy. And his parents had called him Little Houdini because he was an escape artist. They had 2 extra locks on the door, and he still got out. Anyway, I pulled into the apartment complex, and there's a big fountain there, and some teenagers the night before had put soap suds in it. So it was overflowing with soap suds out onto the pavement, 15, 20 feet high bubbles. And I went through and got past that and got the apartment complex. And the first place we always search is the house because 80% of kids are found in their home, hiding. But he wasn't there, so we searched all the known places, the playground he liked best, where his friends were, etc. And after about 45 minutes, we gathered in that parking lot by that fountain, trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to look next? And as we were standing there, and I firmly believe in God and spiritual things, because as we're standing there, this little breeze came up just enough to break a seam in that mass of bubbles, and we saw a red tennis shoe in the water. And reached in and grabbed the young man, pulled him out of the water. He was not breathing, did CPR, had fire on the way. Once we got him there, turned him over to fire, and they took him up to the children's hospital. But unfortunately, and he didn't make it.
Wow.
And, those are the ones that just hurt forever. But the good thing on that day was 18 years as an officer, and I had a lieutenant that came over to me and he put his arm around me. He says, "Are you okay, brother?" And in 18 years, that was the first time that anybody ever asked me if I was okay. And it was also the first time that I was honest, and I told him, "No, I'm not." Because used to be, if anybody said anything, "Oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." And if you hear "I'm fine," I'll tell you what, that's a key to start asking more questions, because they're not fine. But that's what we're taught growing up. I'm fine. I got this. And many times we don't.
Oh. So as you moved up your position as a rookie officer to a detective, you handle bigger and complicated case, right?
Yeah, I started as a juvenile detective, so I worked a lot of kid crimes, and I had one case that led to putting a young man that was kind of the leader of a group of gang members, basically, and they were notorious thieves and things, and I was able to put him in prison for the first time, and that was the one that had drugs and guns and a bunch of other stuff that really blossomed out, and I kind of got lucky on a couple things, but I kept pushing, and that's what I learned is you got to just keep going and going and going. You can't stop. You got to get through to the end. And and I actually was an officer for three years, and then I was in detectives for 8 years. And after 8 years in detectives, I went back to patrol. And having been a detective, it made me a much better patrol officer, because when I went into detectives, I had no clue. I had no clue about how to investigate anything other than real basic stuff. And then once I got out of detectives, I knew, and I was really proud of the fact that afterward, when I picked up a case as an officer, I could run that case to completion. And if I turned it over to detectives, they didn't have to do anything. It was done. And I actually got a couple of commendations from detectives for doing that. And completing the case even before they had it, and making it easy for them. Because it's two different ball games. Patrol is basically take a report, refer it back to detectives, and go, because you don't have time to follow up. And then the detectives do all the follow-up. But detectives is a lot more detailed, because then once you get the case, you have to go find the nitpicky stuff that the attorneys are going to look for and make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then get that so the attorneys are ready for it for the court.
Oh, in a way that you're also helping them, helping the attorney prepare for the court.
Yeah. That's you hand things off to the district attorney, and they're going to ask questions, and the detective's the one that's going to have to follow up and fix that if there's something wrong with it.
Oh, so with a detective position, you're spending more time in office than out on the field.
Yes. Although I got lucky, my first stint in detectives, I got thinking about it as a juvenile detective. the kids that are out on Friday and Saturday nights getting in trouble are the ones that I'm going to be dealing with. And so I got lucky. I worked during the day for 3 days a week, and then for 2 days a week, I would go out on Friday and Saturday nights, and any juvenile problems I would go help take care of. And what that did then was freed an officer up on the street because I took his place, so they had more manpower, and those are the kids I was going to be dealing with. So it got me to know what they're doing and who they're with, and the information that I needed to solve the crimes against them.
Would you say detective is a more comfier position than a regular officer on patrol?
No, I would just say it's different.
It's different.
Yeah, yeah, they both have their positives and negatives, but it's different. Like I was on call as a detective 1 week a month. So 1 week a month, I carried at the time a pager because we didn't have cell phones at that time. I carried a pager with me, and if I got paged, I had to be near a phone to get called in and go into work. And it didn't matter what day, what time, what hour, it didn't matter. And so you had for that 1 week, I had zero freedom. Whereas when I was in patrol, I'd work 4 days a week, 10-hour days, and then the 3 days I was off. And unless it was really, really hairy, then we didn't get called in.
It is definitely a stressful job. So, at what point of your career do you realize that you were dealing with trauma or PTSD? And was there a event that triggered it?
What really caught me up was the story with the boy in the fountain. That's when, when somebody asked me if I was okay, and that's when I said, no, I'm not. That's when I suddenly realized that, man, there's a lot of stuff going on. And at that time, I quit talking. I didn't tell my wife anything about work because I didn't want her to worry. And she had some depression problems, and we finally weren't even talking at all. In fact, then we weren't even sleeping in the same room. And pretty soon I came in and I went, I'm done. I can't do this. And we got divorced. I ended up divorced and bankrupt, and that was the big key right there. Especially, I didn't really realize it at that point, but looking back, it was the effects of, and I won't say it was PTSD, but it was the effects and behaviors that I displayed of PTSD, and they led to choices, and I made some really bad choices at that point. I'm huge on self-accountability because we are the ones that put ourselves in the predicament by our choices. Were they influenced by PTSD? Oh, absolutely. And many of the behaviors I showed were common to PTSD, anger. I'd respond and snap in anger, and then I'd back off and go, okay, what am I doing? But by then it was too late. And trying to prove myself at work all the time. Somebody was worried I wouldn't be able to handle myself in a fight. Well, it turns out I ended up in between 40 and 50 foot chases and fights throughout my career. And I was always pushing to be better. And in reality, sometimes I didn't need to push. I was doing fine. And so those are PTSD related things, and risk taking is a PTSD related thing. But those are the things that I was doing, and I had no clue why. I just was doing them. And then once I finally realized it, and after I got divorced, I got remarried. And I'll be honest, I screwed up my life. I had an affair. And I mean, what's the biggest risk you can take? Putting the thing that's most important to you at risk, and that's your family. And I did that. And I'm not proud of it. I did that. And that will never happen again. But I screwed up, and then I paid the price. And now I've learned, and that's kind of when I started really learning about it. And I actually married the gal that I had the affair with. But then the behaviors didn't change. And the end result, I got divorced from her too. Now, there were a lot of other things involved in that, but some of them were still the same PTSD-related behaviors. And so when I finally looked at myself and said, what are you doing? What's the common factor here? And I had to look in the mirror and say, it's me. I'm the common factor. What did I do? I'm a two-time loser is how I looked at it. And I didn't want to be. I didn't want the first one. But I'm the one that filed for it. And, those are all things that I had to look back on and really started looking at myself real hard. I lived at my cabin by myself in the mountains for 3 years. And I got back in touch with nature. And I got back in touch with who I really am. And I started working on my healing process at that point, trying to figure out what it was I was doing and why I was doing them. And that's when I started really digging into PTSD and the healing process started.
Wow, Mother Nature is truly a healer. So what are some of your methods of healing that you teach out there?
Well, for me, Mother Nature's huge. Um, and I'll share another story in a few minutes on that. But if you've ever heard, I will not use drugs of any kind. I mean, I might take aspirin twice a year if I'm really having a bad muscle aches and headaches. But I will not do drugs of any kind. But ketamine is known as a great PTSD treatment for some people. I used holistic type healing. If you ever heard of Tibetan bowls or singing bowls, they're bowls made by monks in Tibet that when you rub a stick on them, they make a humming sound, and they're beautiful and they're soothing, and they can actually heal physical pain. But when I go have this, I have a gal that does this for me, and I go into a trance and I see things, have visions. It's kind of cool. I actually saw where I was going to be living 2 years from that point. I didn't know when, but I knew I was going to be living there somewhere. And then when I stood in the backyard of the lot we picked out, there were the red rocks that I saw down in the desert. And that was, I didn't even know it until I stood on that spot, and I went, that's what I saw in my vision. And that was 2 years before. But that is a healing and a soothing process. When I was a cop, if somebody said drum circle, I thought about a bunch of hippies smoking weed and beating drums around a bonfire. Well, they actually have shaman-led drum circles, which are the shamans do it for healing. And as you go around, again, the vibrations, just like the bowls, and the tones, just like the bowls, and the peacefulness of the prayer, and the chants and things are very healing. And so those kind of help me maintain where I'm at. Like say for me, I was flying into an airport one day, and I have a service dog, and he was misbehaving that day. And so I really had mispacked, and everything wasn't working well that day at all. And so all of his tools were in my fly-on luggage instead of carry-on. And so I only had one thing I could do, and that is submit him, because he wasn't paying attention to the other thing I had. So I plopped him down on the ground, submitted him, and this gal went crazy on me. You can't treat a dog like that, a service dog like that. And she just started yelling and screaming, and pretty soon she had yelled and screamed so much, 20 or 30 people had gathered around me. Well, I went into, I had a PTSD reaction. First off, when she came and yelled and screamed at me, she was charging me, and I swung my arm around and I said, "Get back!" And I yelled like a cop, "Get back!" And, get away. And I thought she was trying to hit me. And then I went back to my dog where I'm calming him, but she's keeping him amped up. And by then I was around, and my vision just kind of sucked in. And I've only had that really happen one other time, one incident that I had, but it sucked in and I couldn't see anything, and I didn't even know where I was at. And I've been to that airport probably 7 or 8 times, and I was on my way to find the dog room to relieve my service dog, or let him relieve himself, and I got lost. I got lost for an hour, and I could not find my way out, anything. And when I finally got down to the luggage carousel, the only one there was my wife and our bag. Everybody else was gone. So I'm looking around, it took me a long time to work through it. And then I had nightmares 4 nights in a row. And I've had a lot of nightmares throughout times until I started dealing with it. And I was down to like 2 or 3 a year. And then I had 4 in a row after that incident. And once, 4 days later, I got up in the mountains. I was in Colorado. And I got up in the mountains, and I just went up there, and I stood on a peak and looked over the valley, and the sun and the exercise, the physical exercise helped. And then after that, I didn't have any more nightmares. But I was breathing is huge. You can do box breathing where you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, out 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, and then repeat the process as often as it takes. And that's a huge calming tool. So that's critical for anything. But again, the tunnel vision I had that day, I've not had it. Everything went gray and dark, and I couldn't even see people. I was just walking dead, like a dead man down the hall.
So that was like the turning point for you to heal yourself, right?
Well, the 3 years in the cabin that was only a year ago when that one happened. But I hadn't had
Holy.
that experience, and that's the one thing about it. It never goes away. We manage it and we deal with it, and it's how we choose to deal with it that creates the life we have. And I could go. My son was blown up in Afghanistan and was severely injured. He's got PTSD, and he doesn't deal with it as well. I keep busy. I do things, and I try to help other people. I discovered that, I'm retired, but if I don't have a purpose, I will fade away. My life will disappear. My purpose now is to help others not make the same mistakes I made. If I can help somebody have a good relationship with their spouse where I didn't, then we both win. I have a wonderful relationship with a great lady now. After I healed myself, I was able to open up. And I don't shut up now. I don't hold no secrets whatsoever. You want to know it? I'll tell you. and that's the way my wife and I are. She has no secrets. I have no secrets. And it's a great way to live. And
I'd
so
like
now,
to hear about that success story, that your client success stories.
yeah, well, what's funny is part of what helped me was when I wrote my book, because part of one of the things that helps in healing is journaling. And therapists use this all the time, because then when you write it down, you use more than one sense, and it lets your mind know it's okay to talk about it. And then the mind can open up more. And so when I wrote my book, that was like journaling. And then the book turned into my 8-hour course that I teach to law enforcement in particular, but I can teach it to anybody. In fact, that's how Chris and I met. He's one of my agents, and he's pitching me to corporations now. And so that's what I do now is I travel and I speak to people, and I finished another book, and I've got 2 more in the works, and I found out I like to write, and I'm actually pretty good at it.
Wow. Holy cow. So about your book, so you're also telling your story and you're also including these methods of healing in your new book, right?
I am, yes. Yeah. In fact, that's the book right there. It's called Bridging the Gap. It's on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and you can order it. Make sure to put my name in because there's about 150 of them named Bridging the Gap. I didn't know that at the time.
Wow. Bridging the Gap by Glen Williams.
Yeah. And I'm kind of proud of that. That was my first effort. And now, like I say, I'm writing one other done, waiting in editing now. And then I have 2 others in mind. And I'm co-writing some books with people on trauma and on leadership. And yeah, so I keep busy. And that's one of the things is got to keep busy too.
Holy smoke. You're a busy person, busy as a bee.
Well, it's a good way to be. And when I slow down, I have a hard time. I have a hard time slowing down.
Wow. And how can the audience reach out to you?
They can get on my website is www.gdubauthor.com. So they
Awesome.
can go to that, and that has podcasts on there. You'll be on there soon. And it's got links to books, and as I add more books, they'll be there. And it talks. I put whatever I can on there, and then I have a gal that helps me with that because I'm a little technologically challenged. But it's fun, yeah. And then they, if they want to reach me, they can reach me through the website.
Through the website.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much, Glenn. I'll make sure to link it in the podcast description. Thank you so much, Glenn, for your amazing story and your time today. You have been absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you. And just a closing message is don't keep secrets. Talk about things because if you keep them inside, they'll eat you alive. So open up, share, and make sure everybody's okay.
Make sure everybody is okay. Wow, golden advice. Thank you so much, Glenn.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.
Sweatpants to Suits is a podcast where we dive into the journeys of career professionals, uncovering the secrets to transforming from sweatpants mode to suits success. Join us as we explore personal stories, insights, and strategies for cultivating a growth mindset and achieving your vision of success. I am your host, Jerry. Are you ready to up your game? Stay tuned, new episode releases every Tuesday.